Welcome to another episode of Hi, I'm Doctor. And today we actually have one of my mentors, one of my business and clinical mentors, Dr. Hesham Sherghin out of London, Ontario. Um, it's really hard for me to describe Hesham because he's just so good at everything from being an amazing dentist to a multi-practice owner, which, we're going to talk about both of them. I wanted to bring him on the pod because I feel we can all learn something from him. So, Hisham, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome, my man.
You're very welcome, and thank you so much for having me, Neki and Akil. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we're pumped to have you. I don't want to mess around. I know you're a busy dude, so I just want to jump right in. It was funny because when we were in Montreal, we were talking about everyone would come up to you asking you like, how do I own multiple practices? I want to own 10 practices. And yet, they don't even know how a drill actually works, but they want to own 10 practices. And you're like, man, why can't you come to me and ask me how to place the perfect implant?
I'm telling you, I was a little bit hurt about it,
I know.
and it's as a dentist, that's the. I'm a little bit about me. I'm a practicing dentist, right? So I
Yeah.
contribute about 40 to 60 hours a week towards clinical dentistry. And everything else is great. It's my hobby, my passion to do also the business side of things. But yeah, I was a bit hurt when some of these students are like, oh, so tell me how can you open how do you do it where you can open multiple practices? I want to buy a practice right away. And I'm like, man, talk to me about a veneer. How do you cut a perfect veneer or a perfect crown? I'm like, talk to me about dentistry, man. I'm a dentist at heart, right? So,
Yeah.
but it was good. It was definitely a great time, and it was awesome spending it with you guys.
Yeah, no, it was I had a lot of fun there, man. It was wicked. But I wanted to, before we even get into any of this, like, can you tell us about your journey? Like I still find it so interesting, and I'm sure everyone would like to hear it as well. So tell us, like, where'd you go to dental school and what happened after?
Absolutely. So my journey starts before dental school.
Okay.
So I grew up in Windsor, Ontario, Canada. And, I come from my dad is a urologist. So it was a natural thing for me to just want to explore the medical world. So first semester, I was just not taking school seriously. I got two B's, two C's, and a D minus. And very few times in my life where my dad actually had to sit down with me and give me the talk. You know what I mean? Not a lot of people can say they're proud that their dad sit down and have the talk with them, but it literally changed my life because he basically said to me something very simple. Well, what do you want to do with your life? Because based on the way that you're going right now, you're not really going to end up anywhere. So what do you want to do? I said, well, I really want to do medicine. He said, okay, medicine is great. You got that little business spark in you. Have you considered dentistry? We have a good close family friend that practices just literally 5 minutes away from us. So I shadowed him, and the rest is history. After that, it was literally a straight A path. I found my calling in that sense. From there, I enrolled into dental school at the University of Detroit Mercy. It was only about a 20-minute drive from where I lived, so I decided to stay close to home. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I know everybody goes through the struggle of, do I specialize? Do I go into general dentistry? Do I do a GPR or AEGD? So for me, it was one of those things where I just couldn't get enough of it. And most of the fourth years were just burnt out. They were ready to just start practicing. And I was just still working my cases. I wanted to continue to do more and more and more. So doing an AEGD was just the natural progression for me because I didn't get enough of, call it, academic institutional dentistry. After that, I wanted to go to practice in Santa Barbara, California. That was
Really?
that
I didn't
my
know that.
thing.
Yeah.
I wanted to practice somewhere warm. I'm originally from Libya, so the cold didn't really do it for me. I wanted to go somewhere warm where there's plenty of beaches, good lifestyle. Applied for a couple of positions, got a couple of offers, and I got cold feet. So
Mm.
the next the next best thing for me was London, Ontario. It was about an hour and a half away from Windsor, and I had a lot of really good friends that were doing their PhDs, and their lifestyle was pretty cool. Partied a lot, had a lot of good, obviously a great time. So I applied to a couple of positions there, and that's where it all really happened. So one of the people that interviewed me, his name was, he passed away, his name was Rick Merritt, and at the time he owned and operated about 9 dental practices in and around the area. So this guy was like the pioneer of DSOs in the region. He was the black sheep in the community, the guy that owned, one practice is too many in everyone else's eyes. And
Yeah.
he was reaching the age of, he was getting there. He was in his 70s, and it's time for him to slow down. And he basically said, "Hey, we'd love to bring you on. You seem like you got a good head on your shoulders, a good personality. I'm more than happy to mentor you and help you, not just how to do dentistry, but how to be a good businessman, a good leader. And maybe one day I'll give you the whole, I'll sell you the company." It didn't work out that way, unfortunately. We didn't see eye to eye on basically the big scheme of things and the pricing of the practices. I ended up just buying one of his clinics, but that's where the spark happened. That's where he showed me what to do, what not to do. That's where he showed me the possibilities, right? How do you scale things up? How do you benefit from economies of scale? And so I don't come from a business background. But all of a sudden, seeing just these opportunities, it just opens your eyes. And now all of a sudden, you go from someone in the dental world to now looking at the business world and figuring out, well, oh my God, like I can't get enough of both. Fast forward 10 years, I still feel like a little kid. Honestly, I feel like I just finished my MBA at Ivy. And that was just a massive renaissance for me, because as much as you think you know so much, you jump into a world and you know nothing again. And now it's just that quest for knowledge is just endless. Every day I wake up and I'm thinking, how can I learn? How can I try to inspire someone to learn and try to push the needle forward, and really try to be the best version of myself, not for myself, but for others. And I think that's kind of where I'm at right now. It's a really cool place to be in. And I hope and I wish that everybody can get in a position where, they do what they do because they want to, not because they have to.
For sure. And I mean, that's such a, inspiring story. And we could talk, well, we're going to talk a lot about, a lot of your successes and Neki hyped you up right before we met in Montreal. He's like, you got to meet this guy, super inspiring, one of my mentors. But I think more than success, what brings people together is failure. And I want to know, what are some of your biggest screw ups? Like, what are some times you're kind of itching your head and you're like, oh man, like, how did I let that happen?
Get
Oh,
right
man.
into it right off the bat, man.
I
Come
know.
on.
Right away, Akil. Well, I'll tell you. So my mindset is a little bit different. I find that, unfortunately, for our profession, most people graduating out of dentistry are afraid to fail. You got to recognize that dentistry, we fail every day. Think about it. When a patient comes in and there's a root canal that you did, 3, 4, 5 years ago, and now there's pathology around it, that's a failure. When an implant that you placed, whether it was too close to the sinus or too close to the periphery of the bone, and you start seeing bone loss, that's in my eyes a failure, right? But we got to lean into that. I mean, we got to embrace failure. I'm not saying for us to fail, right? That's not the point. The point is to recognize that every day we try and give 110%. But when failure happens, that's an opportunity for us to really level up, right? Because when success happens, you're like, great, that's how can I be better? But I did pretty good. It looks good. The restoration looks great. I'm good. That's fine. But when a failure happens, that's when it wakes you up. That's when you're able to, not really sleep well at night, or have that, feeling that you really possibly did harm to a patient. And that's where you really push yourself to a new height. So I've never really looked at a failure as a hindrance. I've always looked at it as a tool that you could use to really level up. And I mean, keep in mind, like I was, growing up, I loved playing basketball, and unlike Neki, I'm literally 5'7". Neki took all the height, and for me, it was always I had to work harder. You know what I mean? To make it to the basketball team, I had to not just I had to fail a lot more and constantly go back to the drawing board and see how I can be better. And I think that's what people constantly just forget. It's okay to fail. It's okay. We're not living in a finite world. We're living in an infinite world. And in an infinite world, if you truly believe that, failure makes you better, right? Whatever it is, anytime you fail, you take a step back, you use it as a learning moment, and you move forward to a greater height that hopefully you don't make the same mistake twice, and hopefully it just makes you better at what you just failed at.
So like, if you think of failure like a muscle, like I have this, new notion, and I think of everything like a muscle, like a bad attitude's a muscle, good attitude's a muscle. If you look at failure in particular, where other than the basketball court did you learn how to fail consistently and put yourself out there? Because generally what I see is seeing dentists and how they operate, and even some of my classmates, we're pretty risk adverse people, which I mean is kind of a criteria to go into dentistry, because you don't want the dentist that's going to be like, all right, I'm going to do this drill behind the back, through the legs. Like, you don't really want someone like that. You want someone that's going to, be methodical. And I guess you could have both, but I want to know, where did you learn how to fail?
Um, where did I learn how? That's a really good question, Nikhil. Where did I learn how to fail? You know what it is. It's initially when you first fail, as everybody knows that, right? It's the moment where you feel crushed. You like go to a dark space. I'll give you a perfect example. So before we lived in Windsor, my parents and our family lived in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. And my sister went to school she got into Western, and on my senior year, my family decided to move to Windsor, Ontario. And not only moved to Windsor, Ontario, but put me in an enriched program, a gifted program. And for me, that was probably the toughest moment of my life, because if you think about it, your senior year, that's like your glory year, right? It's like, okay, senior basketball team, this is our year. You got your friends, you got your your girl crushes, like, you remember, like, that's your year. And for me, I moved from that and being, loving my friends, loving the people around me, being a good spot, and all of a sudden moved to a completely different world where the IQ is like through the roof. Like, keep in mind, some of the people in my class were competing at, international math Olympiads. Like the guy who, funny, turned into my best friend afterwards, he was ranked number 4 on the planet, right? In math, right? Like, here's a guy that was, I think he was top 5 at the time as a pianist, right? A competitive soccer player, a math guru, and he was just doing crazy stuff. And of course, I jump into this class and I was just completely lost. Like, I kid you not, Neki and Akil, like, my grades were, I was worried about even getting into undergrad, right? That's how bad my grades were. And what made it even harder for me was, obviously when you come in, we had a family friend of ours whose kid was in the same class as me. And they made this kid to be like the, smartest kid in the class, right? It turned out that he wasn't really being truthful as what he was telling his parents, right? So they're like, oh, this guy, he's number 1 in his class. You should hang out with him. You should learn from him. You guys should study together. Meanwhile, the guy's literally cheating off of me, right? I don't know what he was cheating off of in a sense, because he was just failing equally as me, right? And at the time, I remember it was such a dark place. Honestly, it was one of those things where my folks were just thinking about sending me back to Saskatchewan, because you feel beat, you feel like failure at the highest level, where your friends aren't there anymore, where your connections have basically been lost. And I always took pride in being a good student, and that was basically taken away from me, right? And then you kind of find that moment and you say, well, you got 2 options here. Option number 1 is that you can basically just bow out and just call it is what it is, or you can go ahead and just continue to push yourself and use that energy, those emotions and feelings, and channel them to becoming better. So I literally remember, worked my ass off, climbed up to the honor roll that year, just in 1 year. And from there, I remember they printed off the honor roll list, right? Yeah. And I mean, the best moment of honestly of that entire year, obviously I've made some great friends and everything as well. The best moment was literally walking up. I remember I waited until like everybody stopped looking at the sheet. I ripped the sheet and I took it to my parents, right? But at the time, nice. I was naive. Though. I didn't want to show my parents that I made the honor roll, right? I wanted to show my parents that guy didn't make the honor roll, right? Because it literally broke my heart, because the whole time I'm like, guys, mom, that he's not, like, this guy is not being truthful. Like, they're like, oh, it's okay. You don't need to be jealous. He's a good kid and everything like that. So that was just my moment. And you know what, after that, you really just start, looking at it and really kind of just figuring out and recognizing that, failure is not anything other than it just really questions what you want to do and where you want to go, right? And I experienced something very similar my first year in undergrad. And you know what, once you look at that, it just really challenges, what do you want to do, right? If you fail, is this something that you want to continue to do? If you do, you have to level up your game. right? And I think that that's very important that people need to recognize. It doesn't mean that you'll never do it again if you fail. It just means that, you know, you weren't good enough or you didn't meet a certain criteria, and all you have to do is maybe take a step back, push harder, stay more focused, you know, reinvent certain things or put together a different game plan and come back stronger.
I that's one of the things I've always admired about you, Hesham, is you got grit and you got drive. And in your mind, there is no failure. And that's something, you know, I've always been a little jealous about because, you know, in dentistry, I always get knocked down, you know, more than I'd like to admit. And then I see people like you know, you're a phenomenal dentist. You're so smart when it comes to running practices and building up clinics. And I feel like I just don't have that capability. You know, when we're out of school, we're always looking to grow, but the only way to grow is maybe through mentorship. Who are the people in your life that you go to like now to help guide you the way and show you what is possible?
You know, it's a very good question. Now, you know, you said that I'm one of your mentors, Nike. You're one of my mentors, right? And for me, I think I have an amazing network of people. I think that's one of the things that I'm extremely fortunate of. One of the most important things that I want anyone to take home is the law of reciprocity, right? If you want to build your network, you need to start making connections and start helping people make connections to be better, right? And I think that that's a huge point to take, because once you build your network, you know, there's always going to be people that specialize at doing certain things that nobody else can. You know, if as I mentioned in the past, Nikki, if I have any issues with exodontia or a third molar, I'm not going ahead and talking to one of my mentors who is a venture capitalist or a banker or an accountant. I'm calling Neki. You know what I mean? If I have an issue, for example, with scaling up an office or a management related issue, you know, I call my friend Emin Shivji from 123, right? I have, you know, different accountants, different, you know, if it's a spiritual thing, I'll pick up the phone and call my dad. You know, I feel like we look at a mentor as at one person, right? And I don't think that that's not the way to look at it. I think that you should look at having a group or a network of mentors, and every one of them can present to you a solution or some advice that allow you to see or provide you with clarity that the other didn't, right? So I mean, and the other thing too is that I'm a big proponent of steel sharpening steel. Like, you know, you would be, I mean, Neki, you've seen our group where on a daily basis, you know, I'm talking to my partners, whether it's, you know, John Sanderson, Jess Takar, all of these, Anand Soni, Nian Kwek, Jeff Sumner, all of these guys on a daily basis. We're talking to each other and we're seeing how we can make each other improve and how do we push each other to the next height. We're, you know, Jazz, for example, one of my partners and I are taking a course at Harvard together. And we're constantly, it's exhausting, it's a grind, but we're constantly pushing each other. Hey, make sure that you do this, and hey, make sure you jump on this early enough. And so to answer your question, Nikki, you know, it's I would say surround yourself by good people. I think that's the most important thing. A mentor, everybody, I think it's that hot word that everybody wants to use, but everybody is a mentor, in my opinion, as long as they genuinely want to give you good advice, as long as they have something to offer, but also be more than willing to be the first person to give as well, right? Be more than happy to share information, establish connections. Don't hog the people, for example, that are in your world and you don't want to share them with a friend or a loved one because of the good advice that they're giving you, and you don't want to share that with others. So establish those connections, and you know what, tap into people's skill sets, because if those people care about you, if they love you, and if they know that you're a good person and you would do the same for them, whatever specialty field that they're in, they're always going to give you some good insight that will provide you with the direction, or at least help you provide clarity with where you want to go.
I kid you not. I think we had a conversation just last episode on that exact same framework of mentorship. Have a different mentor for each domain in your life. That was great. But I mean, you know, you mentioned some, and I watched your talk that you did in London with Vic, and you know, you did mention Amin Shivji, and he was the first guest of this pod. I just want to know, how do you even begin to approach these sort of behemoths of the industry? Is it just a cold email? Is it a common friend? What's your methodology?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you the Emin story, because that one is super unique. So a couple of years ago, I was just at an event in London, Ontario, and one of Amin's main operations people was at this event, and she's like, "Oh my God, you remind me of this guy that I work with. He's incredible. You have to meet him." And I'm like, "Okay, sure, yeah, no problem. I'm more than happy to coordinate something." So we coordinated a day. It was like 8 p.m. in Toronto, right? And at the time, I remember there was just a massive blizzard. Like this was like the blizzard of the century that was happening. And I'm like, no, I'll be there, right? Because at the end of the day, I truly did, and I still do respect and have so much value for someone like Amin Shivji that I'm like, no, you know what? His time is valuable. I'm going to do whatever it takes to make it to that appointment, sit down, shoot the shit, say hi, get to know one another, and we go from there, right? And then we'll see what happens. And that's what I did. I literally drove, I think it was like 3.5 to 4 hours from London, which is roughly around an hour and a half to 2 hour drive. So double through this blizzard to literally for like, I think it was like about a half an hour to an hour, meal. And I literally just drove back, made it home, I think at like 2 or 3 a.m. And I remember I worked the next day. And, it's one of those things where, if you know Amin, he's one of those guys that, he'll take his shirt off his back and give it to you if he knows that you're a good person. Even if he doesn't, he's that kind of guy. And I think that's how we've always just built up our relationship from there, right? During the pandemic, we've strengthened our relationship as well. And he's just been one of those individuals, as I mentioned, like you ask for advice and he'll be more than happy to give you unsolicited advice that will just help you be better. Use your network. If you don't have a network, use things like LinkedIn, reach out to your financial advisors, your bankers, and just say, hey, this is where I want to go. Do you know anybody in this space that can help me out? And you'd be surprised the responses that you're going to get.
You're so right. I think everyone wants to be a mentor. I think at the end of the day, that's all we have left in life is to pass on our knowledge to the next generation, and you always want to give back what you've learned, whether it's success or failures. But how do you keep, like, we both get questions all the time, people ask you an individual question. For you, it's like, how do I grow? How do I scale? For me, it's, how do I not mess up? You taking out a tooth, whatever it may be. But like, how do you, once you find that person, how do you keep them interested in continuing to mentor you? Like, how do you not be that annoying person that's always emailing you? You know what I mean? How do you maintain
100%.
That relationship?
I think you have to, there has to be an essence of professionalism. There has to be an essence of thought process. There has to be an essence of the true ability to push yourself and improve yourself. And there has to be the element of, as I mentioned to you, reciprocity. Because at the end of the day, don't get me wrong. I mean, as I said, Amin is one of my mentors. I love the guy, but there has been mutual relationships, right? Where if there's an opportunity, for example, I picked up the phone and gave him a call, or if I find that there is something that he needs to know about, I pick up the phone, I give him a call, just because that's what, brothers do. That I would do the same thing for any of you, or brothers or sisters in arm in that sense. But I mean, nothing is worse than someone calling and asking the same questions, because at the end of the day, it shows that they have, no regard for, either they don't have regard for your time, or they're lost. They don't understand where they're going. And of course, you have to give direction. You have to maybe reset certain things and help guide them in a certain way. But that's what I find that the most frustrating thing sometimes is that, somebody asks me a question that they could easily find a solution to themselves.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So for sure, I'll go ahead and answer that for them. I'm more than happy to, but then they'll ask me another question and they could easily find that solution by just literally typing it into Google or wherever. And I think that it's important for me, if I'm engaging somebody, yes, I'm always happy to answer the question, but I'm truly engaged and motivated with the individuals that are pushing themselves, the individuals that take all the advice that I give them back to the drawing board, do some self-reflecting or some improvement, send me some feedback as to their progress and their journey, and then come at me or come back at me at a higher state, right? Or now they're running into a different problem. For example, Neki, imagine if I called you and I said, hey, Neki, I'm having a hard time with this, let's just say, horizontally impacted wisdom tooth. send you some pictures, I send you a radiograph, and you go ahead and you spend an hour basically drawing up the game plan and the approach and how to go ahead and manage this case. And then a month later, I call, I say, Neki, man, another horizontal impaction, dude, this thing is kicking my ass. And it's the exact same thing. And I didn't implement all of the strategies that you went ahead and you told me to consider, right? You're not going to be engaged at that point. You're like, dude, I just told you all of this stuff and you're not listening. Maybe I need to approach or change my strategy or my approach to how I'm teaching you. And you might do it once or twice. And then after a while, you're like, man, this guy or girl just doesn't get it, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, that takes a bit of the wind out of our sail, right? Because I want to see growth, right? If I'm going to give you my time for free, I want to see it well spent. I want to see, for example, Akil, that if I'm giving you some advice that you're taking it, and you don't need to listen to me. I'm not saying for you to follow it to a T. All that I'm saying is take my advice and consider it and put yourself in a situation where you become better. So when we talk next time, you say, hey, Sham, I took your advice and you know what? I decided to go in a slightly different direction. Thank you for the feedback, but here's where I'm at today. And this is the problem that I'm running into. What are your thoughts? Right. And that's very important to me because I mean, I've had people that are be like, hey, I'm having a hard time between differentiating from going from this job to another job. I need your advice. I said, sure. If you don't mind me asking, can you send me your contracts so I can review them? Can you send me your pay stubs, for example, so I can see how much money that you're making or what you're being compensated so I can help you make the best decision possible? And they come back to me and say, I don't feel comfortable sharing that with you. Okay, well, that's okay. If that's the fact, then how do you expect me to give you good unsolicited advice if you're either not giving me all of the information or if you're not taking the advice that I'm giving you and basically using it to assess the situation or the problem that you're currently dealing with?
Yeah. It's like they trust you, but they don't, right?
Yeah, 100%. And as I said, like we feel good by giving back. But after a while, you feel that, you know what, somebody's just robbing my time away from either my family, my friends, or other individuals that I can help, and they're not really utilizing it the best way possible. And I mean, that's my biggest take home for anyone here who's engaging, whether it's a mentor or has any questions. Just come prepared, do some deep thinking. That way, when you're asking anyone questions, there's more of a deeper purpose and a meaning to those questions, and you'll be able to take them and hopefully, take yourself to the next level or solve whatever problem that you're dealing with at the time.
You're so right. Like admittedly, I've had some big screw ups in in reaching out, because I'm a pretty open guy when it comes to reaching out. I'll reach out to anyone, even if, there's zero chance to, get in touch with them. I reached out to I think it was the CEO of MasterCard. I forget his name.
What? Did you?
Yeah, I reached out to the CEO of MasterCard and I'm like, hey man, can I just have like 10 minutes? And he basically said no, but he sent me a response and he's like, I'm really bombarded with, he's an Indian guy. What's his name? Anyways, I'll get it. But he's like, I'm very busy with day-to-day operations. I can't really take the time right now, but stay in touch kind of thing. And I'm like, wow, like, this like random Google search got me your right email. That's good enough. But like as you say that, I've had like those moments where I'm like, I'll reach out to someone, they'll say yes. I won't think they'll say yes, and then I just kind of shit the bed at that interview or like that chat, and I'm like, damn it, I peaked too early. Or I'll ask them like a question, and then down the road when I know way more, I'm like, oh my god, like I had access to like Hesham, like why'd I ask him about how to hold a drill, right? It's like
that's
like
what he wants, man. That's what he wants.
Dude, tell me, I'll tell you how to hold a drill, man. No problem at all.
Yeah.
The other thing too, Akil, sorry to interrupt, but the other thing too is just recognizing and knowing where you are, because that's powerful. I mean, you gotta like, for me to give good unsolicited advice, not only do I need information of where you're at, I need to give you advice for where you're at on your path. So think about it this way. If you're on a journey, you're driving from, let's just say, Toronto to London, Ontario. Okay. And basically, I'm giving you basically directions when you arrive to London. You see what I mean? Sometimes you won't appreciate those directions until you get there. Right. And if I'm using that analogy, for example, to your career or your life or whatever it is, by me giving you advice 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years from where you currently are at your journey right now, it may not have any substance or value to you. So at that point, you look at it and you're like, you could, to your point, you could say, damn, now I know what this guy was talking about when I interviewed him 3 years ago. But the point here is that going to give you the highest level of value? You see what I mean? So for example, when we were talking about, at the student conference, my biggest thing was everybody was talking to me about practice ownership, about, how much money do you make? Or, how many practices do you own? And all these
Someone
other
asked
different
that?
things.
Oh yeah.
Necky's got a funny story there. But the point here is that all will come, right? And I'm more than happy to answer that to you. But your first focus should be, how do you hold a drill? Right? Or how do you deliver the exceptional patient care? How do you deliver a quality restoration or a root canal? Right? I'm more than happy to help you. I'm an expert at that. I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars learning all of those things, right? And I'm more than happy to share them with you, because if I tell you right now how to improve your top line revenue running 30 clinics, it's going to have zero value to you, and you're not going to be able to take it tomorrow and apply it immediately. Right. So I think it's very important to ask the questions based on where you are in your journey. Right. And that's the take home advice that I want people to understand. Yes, if you have a vision as to what you want to become in the future, I think there's value there, but you shouldn't ask questions based on your future self, right? Where you need to still get there. You should be asking questions of, how do you get there, or what steps can make you better tomorrow?
I totally agree. I want to share your response. I'll let you give your response. We were sitting down, and fourth year came up to us, and they were looking at you, and they said, I want to open up a practice next year. And you had some really good advice, and I personally wasn't thinking of that. Do you remember that conversation?
I remember the guy. I remember the conversation.
Yeah.
I don't know if I remember my answer though.
No. Okay, so because we have a lot of dental students and newer dentists listening. Can you if I was a brand new dentist, fourth year, if I was in Achilles shoes, hey, I want to open up a practice in Toronto next year, what's your answer, man?
So why? First of all, ask why. Why do you want to open up a practice? But what kind of practice? Where is your practice going to be? What kind of patients do you want to service? How do you know what kind of patients that you want to service when you haven't practiced yet?
Yeah.
Do you want to be downtown Toronto, where there's a certain demographic? There's a certain restrictions, for example, on the space that you're going to have, or do you want to go rural? Right, different demographics. So how do you know what works and what doesn't work for you? Do you want a big clinic, 10, 20, 30 operatories, or do you want a boutique clinic, one or two operatories? So the point that I always want to emphasize is, have you truly thought about it? Have you done your homework? And more importantly, do you know what you're good at and what you're not? Right? It's the most common mistake that I see dentists make early on, is that the concept of owning a dental practice is so ingrained in their head that they forget what drives them. They forget what kind of style of dentistry do they want to go ahead and deliver. They forget what kind of dentistry are they even good at. Do they like, if you go ahead and set up a practice, for example, in a community that has a very high pediatric population, and you hate working on kids, that's not going to work for you. And now all of a sudden you've put yourself in a situation where you own a practice that has a ton of kids that you don't want to see. So it naturally just starts handicapping you, right? So, and I have a good friend of mine. We've actually acquired this individual's clinic. Great guy, like amazing personality. Necky's met him too. Really nice guy. He started as an associate, and after his first year, he bought the clinic that he was working at. Okay, and not only at the time he didn't develop, his clinical skills weren't developed, but he didn't really know what kind of demographic that he wanted to service. He actually is more focused on, he loves surgeries, he loves exodontia, he loves things that don't align with where this practice is located. This practice is located right next to a shopping mall. Right. So where he would love to have a practice, for example, in a rural community where he can do a lot of extractions and a lot of cases like that. So my recommendation is figure out what you're good at first, right? Then go ahead and do your homework and recognize, what clinic basically meets who you are, right? What clinic checks off all of the boxes. And then from there, go ahead and see where you will like to go ahead and establish that.
All right. Yeah, Necky and I were talking last week about, people love implants and multi-practice ownership. And,
It's like the
you
two
know,
sexiest things in dentistry,
yeah,
eh?
it's also the
Yeah.
two highest, well, potentially highest earning things. And a lot of the times when you look at these sort of issues, you can learn a lot more after speaking to that person and seeing what their story is and seeing, what chip they have on their shoulder to want to prove to, maybe it's their parents, maybe it's their friends, maybe it's their, partner. Like who they want to prove wrong is themselves. I just wonder, you've accomplished so much and done so many cool things. What's well, one, do you have a chip on your shoulder? And two, what is it?
You know what? I think the chip on my shoulder, I would say, is I'm always looking at my. I don't know if I would call it a chip on my shoulder, right? For me, it's always, looking back, for example, and saying, shoot, I should have done better. I should have done more. I'm constantly my own worst enemy in a sense. I think my biggest focus right now is how to make the people around me reach heights and reach objectives that I've been able to do sooner, right? And I think my biggest chip on my shoulder right now, I guess I could say, is that, not everybody sees the world the same way that I see it, right? And I think that this is something where, as a parent of a 9-month-old, I'll need to start working on, in the sense where, for example, you have people that you have, a tremendous amount of respect for, a tremendous amount of love for, as let's just even a practicing dentist, and you want to make them as either a partner, or you want to make them, or you want to provide them with more education, or help them, or give them the right path. And sometimes they don't take it. You know what I mean? And a lot of times I look at myself and I'm just like, shoot, like, where did I go wrong? Like, imagine, Akil, if I came up to you and I said, Akil, this, for example, dental practice that you're working at is doing $4 million in production, and I'm going to go ahead and give you half of it for $2 million. And you say, no, I don't want to. You're working there, right? Oh, and guess what? This office will probably do 5 or 6 million the following year. And when I get the no, I'm not looking at the person that says the no, I'm looking at myself, right? Is to say, well, how come did I not deliver the message, for example, in an accurate way? Did I not educate Akil as to the value that this has? Did I misread Akil as to his ambition to own or to learn this certain skill set? So that's where I'm always looking at myself and saying, well, how can I be a better version of myself, not just for myself, right? I mean, recognizing that it's not about that. Now, at a certain point in your career, you start thinking about how you can be a better version of yourself for others, right? And I think that that's what I'm really working on right now. It's to say, well, how can I make sure that I deliver a message with conviction, but deliver it in a way that you're able to see it, for example, Akil, through your eyes, that it makes sense. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, you reach a certain point, and Necky's feels the same way here. You reach a certain point where it's not about you anymore. Like, I mean, I'm fortunate enough to say that I can literally retire tomorrow and never hold a drill for the rest of my life. And basically, I think I'd live life in misery at that point. But but that being said, I don't need it anymore, right? But now you're thinking, okay, well, how can I get the people that I love, the people that are in my network, in my camp, to a position where they feel that same value that I feel? Because if I can get them there, then their purpose becomes different. You know what I mean? Then they're not thinking about themselves more than they're thinking about others and how to give back and how to help. And in my opinion, that's where humanity really thrives, right? When you're looking at a bigger and higher purpose. But before you do that, unfortunately, in our society today, you have to feed yourself first, right? You have to be able to pay your bills. You have to be able to, make sure that you put yourself in a comfortable position in order for you to think about it. It's not a coincidence, for example, that some of the wealthiest people on the planet are spending a lot of time in philanthropic work right now. It's because they've earned a lot, but also at the same time, now they have that tendency and the feeling to give back, because they're not thinking about hunger. They're not thinking about their kids' education fund. They're not thinking about their student lines of credit that they have to still pay off. They're not thinking about that stuff anymore. And what do they think about? They think about a higher purpose. And in my opinion, that's my biggest chip on my shoulder, is that how can I have the people in my world, my colleagues, my associates, my partners, see things sooner? Because if they're able to see things sooner, they'll be richer, right? They'll be wealthier with knowledge and financial wealth as well. And more importantly than anything, they'll have the opportunity to have a higher impact, not on just the industry as it says, it's not just in the industry, but they'll have a higher impact to their communities and to the entire planet.
Man, just going back one thing, is that practice still for sale? Because I'll buy that 2 million for format. You tell me where to sign, I'm in, buddy.
Yeah,
That's one of
absolutely.
the one of the things I've always admired about you, Hesham, is like I was in your offices and I see the camaraderie you have. Like you are a natural born leader, and exactly what you just said. You're always trying to get people to see the broader picture right off the bat. Like I'm working on being that leader for my own team, but you know, I see, I don't always see things as big of a picture as you do. Like, where did you, like, what books do you read, man? Like, how do you learn these leadership styles? Like, where did you pick that up?
Oh, gosh, I don't. It starts at sports, of course. If leadership to me starts with, Muhammad Ali, Michael Jordan, goes obviously to the traditionals, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. You got all of these individuals in that sense. But I mean, to read books, I would say I read a lot of books, and I'm more than happy to share my book list with anybody right now. And I'm more than happy to send you a slide of everything that I've read in the past year. But I think you know what it is, Neki. It's not just reading it, but it's reading and understanding the message of what you read. You know what I mean? I get caught sometimes just trying to go through books. Like I'm literally like if I show you, I think I showed you my office.
Yeah,
My
yeah.
office is literally surrounded by books. Like I have literally like books right now, like galore. Like it's a habit. And I think sometimes you end up getting caught ripping through a book really quick and not really understanding its true meaning. I think
Yeah.
it's not a coincidence that you continue to hear certain books, resurface. You know what I mean? Like how to win friends and influence people by Dale Carnegie. Your Why by Know Your Why by Simon Sinek.
Simon Sinek, yeah.
48 Laws of Power, Rich Dad Poor Dad, Good to Great, Grit, the Checklist Manifesto by Atul Gawande. There's just, and I could keep going. Atomic Habits. Angela Duckworth's, what was hers called? I forget this one. I think it's called Radical Candor. No, sorry, Radical Candor is Kim Scott. Angela Duckworth is, I believe, I forget that one. But my apologies. But the point here is that you just dive into it, really embrace it, and understand what is the message, right? Can you live whatever it is that you read, right? And I think that's what my it doesn't have to be a book a month, a book a day, it could be a book a year, but it's all about what you do with that book, right? And I've always believed that I think someone said this a while ago, but who said it? Dr. Michael Picos. I was at a Picos course a couple of weeks ago, and he said it, and it just resonated it again. He says, if you're not growing, you're dying.
Yeah.
Okay. Simple concept. If you're not growing, you're dying. And growth is not just physical, of course. Growth is mental, psychological, emotional. There's so many different ways to grow. And the day that you don't grow is the day that you're dead, right? So look at yourself at constantly, finding ways to push yourself and to, stretch the limits of knowledge, right? And it doesn't have to be books on self-help and leadership. It doesn't have to be that. It could be books on anything that you find any interest in, or anything that you want to improve your knowledge on. And as soon as you become engaged in something, I think that's what gives life an ultimate purpose, a better flavor, a better meaning, because you're constantly exploring, different worlds, new heights, new languages, new cultures, new thought processes. And, never give that up, because I think that once you give that up, at least for myself, I don't want to live a life where it's kind of like Groundhog Day. Every day I'm doing the same thing over and over again, and I'm just not learning and not really pushing myself to a new height.
Man, I totally hear that, because I see us. I feel guilty because I have this stack of dental not textbooks, but like, business books on my shelf, but I keep on buying books about storytelling, and I am addicted to these storytelling books, how to tell that perfect story. I don't care how much money you make, what your balance sheet looks like. If you want to captivate an audience, you need to know how to tell a story. If you want to be able to sell yourself to your patients, you need to be able to tell a story. And to me, that's what I think is the secret sauce of life. I don't
That's
know,
right.
man. You
I
got your
couldn't agree with
MBA.
that.
You can tell me wrong, but that's that. I really think that's how you get people to like you, and that's how you create influence is from your stories.
You kind of beat my question here. By the way, that the book, it's called Grit by Angela Duckworth. That's what it
Yeah.
was. So the question here is that why do you want to tell the best story, Nikki?
Why do I want to tell the best story?
Why you love storytelling and you're very good at it.
Yeah.
Your keynote speech, by the way, I say this with the utmost respect and sincerity to the profession, is by far one of the best speeches that I've ever heard a dentist say. And I'm not saying that
Thanks,
lightly,
man.
right? But the question here becomes, why are you so interested in storytelling?
Wow, man. I feel like I feel like storytelling is the way that you get to share your soul with the world. It's the way that we can all connect with each other. Because I think storytelling is the only way you can share your vulnerability and it be allowed. And that's how we can connect instantly. And I feel like it can take months. Like you can make a connection months faster through a mutual story than you can just through a business relationship.
100%. I think it's the ultimate form of communication.
Yeah.
You're not using your words, you're not using your visuals or your slides. You're using essentially that connection, that emotional connection. And I mean, your story gave me goosebumps. Like my literally my hair was standing up on my skin. It had a massive impact to everyone who listened to it. And I mean, to everything that we've talked about before, you had by far the best keynote speech I've ever heard a dentist deliver. And you're looking back and you're saying, how can I make this better? Right. And I think that that's, our mindset of constant improving. We're constantly looking at the drawing board and saying, how can I have a higher impact? How can I deliver it better? Or how can I connect with or touch an individual that I may have missed or may have, been focused more on his phone than on listening or hearing what I said.
Yeah. I totally hear you, man. Nikhil, what do you think, man? You reading storytelling books?
Am I reading storytelling books? Yeah, always. I think I'm listening to storytelling books, not reading very much, but yeah, totally. It's like I think you hit the nail on the head. It's the one way in which it gives the license to be vulnerable. And I also think it gives people hope, right? It's like
Yeah,
I always think of
totally.
whenever I face adversity or whenever I really screw something up big time, I'm like, wow, this would make a really good chapter in my book. Like that's the way I view it, because that's kind of that's like, think of the times you've been moved. You haven't been moved by facts. You've been moved by stories, right? There's no other way that you can kind of communicate an idea, as well. Like you said, you can have slides, you can have visuals, you can be singing and dancing, but it's really not going to get that same point across.
It's kind of funny because how you just emailed the CEO of MasterCard? I started emailing all these authors of books, and I never would have thought of doing that without you. Like when you were telling me the guests you've been getting on this podcast, I'm like, how do you just, have the cojones to email some of these big, titans in our field and be like, hey, you want to come on my podcast? I'm 124th in South Africa, but you want to come on my podcast?
That
And
time
they
we were
say,
124th in Uganda. So
Yeah.
oh, right. But they say yes, man. And it's crazy. So I'm like, man, if my homie is just reaching out to these people, well, they must just be people at the end of the day. And I just started emailing these authors, and we always think people are just too far out of our reach to ask questions to, but they're not. At the end of the day, if you get a response, that's great. But I think that's exactly how you make those connections. And I have to thank you, Akil, because you gave me the cojones to make those emails, and I haven't gotten any responses yet, but I'm holding out hope, man. It was a big step just to even write the email.
You only need
Awesome.
one
I
response,
love it.
Nikki. You
That's
only need
right,
one
right?
response. That's
Yeah.
it. That's all that's gonna take. And then the rest is history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also think it's like, I mean, at my stage in my career, I'm like, you guys are way, way ahead of me. So at my stage, I use my lack of, pride or whatever it may be. Like, I mean, if you ask a 50-year-old dentist whether or not they're going to email, whether it be Amin Shivji or Guy Amini or any of these guys or Bill Dorfman, it's like there'd be that like veil of ego in front of them, right? So I kind of sometimes use that, and I hope I never lose that ability to just be like, okay, I don't really care if I don't get a response, because you know, if I don't get a response, like it's not going to hurt me. And if I do, I only have something to gain. So I hope I don't lose that over time. But you know, Hesham, do you sort of still feel like you can, you know, go up to someone, kind of crush on them a little bit, not feel like, you know, this could potentially hurt if they kind of take a stab at me?
No, I mean, I think we were at a talk actually at the same conference, and I love when I go to a talk like a lecture, I love to poke the bear. Like I like to ask some controversial questions, and because I know I want to see what response, because you know how it is, you know anybody speaking is a lot of times they'll have their deck and they have it memorized and they know exactly what to talk about. But you ask a certain question, and if you position it the right way, you get to see, you know, their true knowledge and their true competence, and I guess their willingness to learn, right? So, I asked this guy a question. I know Nick. I see Nick. He's right. He's sitting literally in the row in front of me. So I asked a question about PRF, and the guy was a periodontist. Okay. And, you know, we're all scientists at the end of the day as dentists, and we're all looking to see things that don't work, what kind of improvements are going to get them to hopefully work, to deliver the best, most exceptional care possible, and the things that are consistently working. And as you know, it's kind of a constant battle, right? But as a scientist, you never discredit anybody else's work. It's like a big taboo. You never come up and say as a scientist that, you know, if Akil published something, that this is garbage. You know what I mean?
That's right.
So, you know, I asked the question about PRF, right? And the question that I asked him was, can you talk about certain type of cost saving strategies as a new dentist that we can employ, something that can save us money, for example, that would basically be advantageous for our dental offices or principal dentists to consider, like PRF? That was my question.
Yeah.
But I positioned it in a way to talk about PRF to see exactly how it. So as soon as he heard PRF, his basically blinders went on. So he started talking about PRF is garbage, and he said, "You know what? I'm going to destroy." And I quote, correct me if I'm wrong, Neki. No. And I'm going to destroy you with this answer. That's what the speaker said, right? And he basically went ahead and talked to and discredited what PRF is.
Yeah.
And what we ended up doing was, you know, I didn't obviously disagree. I just said, thank you so much for the answer. And the funny thing here is that when the talk was done, I got up, shook his hand. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. That was a great talk. And Nikki did the exact same thing. Okay. Yep. And the point that I want to say here, and the point that I want to deliver on, is check your ego at the door, right? At the end of the day, I mean, to your point too, Akil, is that I've been fortunate enough to talk to through my MBA and through life some very, very high net worth individuals, or some very affluent individuals in life, in our society today. But I've also been ghosted, or, you know, no response by a lot of people that I've reached out to. You know what I mean? There's so many people that I've reached out to in the past, no response at all, right? And that's okay, because at the end of the day, the way that I look at it is, and to your point, Akil, if somebody says no, I think that it's honestly more, just as much of their loss as it is mine. Right? Because to your point, if you reached out to, for example, Amin Shivji, and he basically didn't respond to you at all, or say, you know, thanks, but no thanks, I don't have time for this, that's his loss. Why? Because he's missed an opportunity. Even if there's one person listening on this podcast, he's missed the opportunity to deliver a message to that one person. And I don't think that there is a difference. And unfortunately for us, we're all caught up now on the numbers game. How many viewers do we have? How many viewers are listening to what we're talking about here? The idea here is that as long as you change one person's life, right? And it could be your own as well. That's all that matters, right? So the way that I look at it is that I could have changed Amin Shivji's life just as much as he could have changed mine. So his inability to reach out to me and say, yes, let's chat, right? It's just as much his loss as it's mine, right? Nobody's better than anybody else, right? Just because someone's had a different journey, or someone has a different personal net worth statement, or somebody views time a little bit differently, doesn't mean that they're better or worse than you. So going back to our periodontist friend, incredible guy. But the point here is that when he went ahead and essentially disregarded the question, right? Or when basically came up and put his ego in front of him, right? That's when he loses, right? And in my opinion, I don't think that you should ever put yourself ahead of somebody else, right? I think if somebody invites you to a podcast or to a talk or whatever, if you have time to make it work, great. If you don't have time to make it work, that's okay. But don't think that it's one person's loss more than the other. It's a mutual it's a mutual gain or a loss, right? And it doesn't matter if it's one person or a million people, or the people that are listening, right? The idea here is that if you changed one person's life, and it could be, one of you two, then it makes a difference.
I totally hear you, because man, we share so many of the same ideas, just in different realms. Like when I used to get super discouraged when I'd go volunteering in like whatever Central America, and I'd come home and I'd be like, but like, there's tens of thousands of people in that area I didn't get to see. And like, am I really making a difference? And then it's that exact same thing you just said. It's the single solitary interactions, those single interactions that you get to have with those people. That's where the difference is made. It's not made on a grand scale. You will never be able, except if you're, in the political arena, you may not be able to make that grand scale difference. But that's not the difference that we're after. We're after changing individual people. And it's those single interactions where you do make the greatest amount of change. So I totally hear exactly what you're saying. It's just that one person you need to make that difference, hey?
Absolutely. And who's to say that that one person won't be that person that influences millions?
Exactly.
Right? That's what people miss. It's not about the number of people that you're influencing, right? It's about who you're influencing, and you hope that you arm those individuals with passion, conviction, direction, education, knowledge, so they can move more people.
Oh, totally, man. Hey, Hisham, did you learn, like when you were doing your MBA, like, is this where they teach you how to create an influence, and how to create that change amongst like a huge organization like you have? Or what does an MBA kind of teach you for a dentist taking an MBA? Like, I've just always been so curious about that.
Sure. Yeah. So what an MBA is, it's a master's in business and administration. Okay. And just like dentistry, every MBA program is slightly different and slightly unique based on the strength that that program has, right? Whether it's leadership, finance, mergers and acquisitions, or leadership, whatever the case may be. I think for me, going into being in dentistry, you almost, in a word, you hear the word pigeonholing yourself.
Yeah.
Right. You become a specialist at doing something that most of the population on the planet doesn't know how to do well, right? Or do at all. And then all of a sudden you start your MBA. And that's when you're like, oh my God, I am nothing. Everything. I've literally spent 10 years learning how to do this beautiful filling or fill this root canal. And this guy next to me can go ahead and rip an Excel sheet, or the guy next to me knows, corporate law or knows banking and finance just as much as I know how to do an MOD. Right. And all of a sudden you see the skills that they have. A lot of times, unfortunately, we can't broadcast or show off our skills as dentists. Think about it. The only way that we can show off our skills is more or less by taking pictures and x-rays of the work that you do. And a lot of the skill set is, of course, is what you're delivering to your patients, which is confidential. You can't share. Right. Yeah. And unfortunately for us, those skills, we can't come up and be like, hey, to the general public, take a look at my work that you can't comprehend. Right. Yeah. But there are so many people in different realms which their skills can easily translate into how they conduct themselves as individuals. You see what I mean? Like, for example, somebody in corporate finance, right? Yeah. They present themselves so much different than somebody who is in the, let's just say, the legal industry, or somebody who's for nonprofits, right? And a lot of the skills that they gain, whether it's leadership because they're public speaking because they're constantly talking, or whether it's, using different types of, pivot tables or regression models on Excel, or whatever the case may be, their tools are so sharp, just as sharp as ours in their world. Right. And I think going into an MBA, in my opinion, don't do a healthcare MBA. Do just an MBA that you're bringing in everybody from different walks of life. You come into that world, and, then all of a sudden, as I mentioned, it's like, nothing. And when you know nothing, that's where you go back to saying, okay, you know what? I got a big gap to cover here. That's where you're trying to get into everybody's world and understand, how does each person's industry function? How do they make money? How do they generate value and wealth? How do they communicate with each other? Who are the key stakeholders? all of these other different things. And now all of a sudden you start to understand and appreciate things from an avenue and a perspective that you wouldn't have ever been able to see if you were still doing an MOD composite restoration in a patient's mouth.
For sure.
Right. So yeah, if I could encourage everybody to do an MBA, I mean, the biggest disappointment, in my opinion, in dentistry is they teach us it's dentistry is a small business. All right. If you're practicing dentistry, whether you're an associate, a practice owner, or a partner working for a DSO, you're working for a business. You know what I mean? And I feel that nobody teaches us business. I know we keep saying it and we keep hearing it. Nobody teaches us business. So most dentists, unfortunately, are illiterate at running, not just running a business, but understanding business, how to invest, how to acquire, how to manage people. And I think that under pushing yourselves and understanding it, whether you're an associate, business owner, an office owner, or whatever the case may be, you should definitely consider it. And within those worlds, that's where your leadership can really shine. Your ability to work as a team could really shine. Your ability to speak publicly, you really get out of your comfort zone. And Neki talking about being vulnerable, I think that's where I truly felt vulnerable, because I was an imposter. I really was. I was going in pretending that I knew something that I don't. Right. So what did I have to do? I had to fake it. I really did. I had to rely on my ability to comprehend things, relatively quickly, to kind of talk my way or talk myself up into something, a little bit of charm. I had to align myself, for example, with, some of the people that are willing to give back and willing to teach me and willing to help me in that sense. And I think that that's very important to understand and recognize, right? Is that I was okay to take that position. But because at the end of the day, I knew that I was going to come out of it significantly better, right? And all of those things. But every one of those individuals also was vulnerable. They knew nothing about dentistry. Right. They looked at me as somebody who was, ultra successful in my world. And it kind of went both ways. But then all of a sudden, when we started getting to know each other, we started seeing what everybody's working on and tried our best to help each other with those vulnerabilities. Right. So we had, for example, one of my classmates, he was the CEO for World Vision. Right. So
Which is crazy.
Michael Messenger. This guy is, so he's got a law degree and a CEO at World Vision, right? And there's a bunch of other CEOs, CFOs, and just COOs, ridiculous brain power in there. And all of a sudden, literally, this guy could come up and no script, no nothing, and speak to an audience and literally deliver one of the best messages that you'll ever hear. Literally, like, tearjerker messages. And you're just like, holy crap, how did this guy just do this? You know what I mean? He had the same amount of preparation that I did. Yeah. But all of a sudden, he's able to go up there and captivate an entire audience when I'm just still trying to comprehend this problem, right? So, but the beauty behind it is it just shows you, exactly, it shows you that the opportunities and the things the world is endless, right? So that's the message here, is that if you want to push yourself, if you truly want to learn, consider doing something that will get you a little bit uncomfortable.
Gosh, pivot tables, that gives me nightmares from when I was a consultant. That's I don't want to hear that word again. But I mean, we're in like an era where we're in an era and we're in a part of the world, medicine and dentistry, where people get degrees until they like fall off the slide, right? You need like multiple slides to show your degrees. But I think very little thought goes into, personal development and how do you be a good person? How do you be a secure, honest person? And, there's this notion of, being a successful individual like yourself and having a family, as you said, you have a wife, you have a young child. Those two things are sometimes said to be mutually exclusive. How have you found a way to bridge that gap between the two?
I mean, it's a constant improvement mindset, right? Everybody requires attention, requires time, commitment. It's not a balancing act, and the way that I look at it is a counterbalancing act. But I think you can't say enough about making sure that you find a dance partner that understands what you're going through. They understand the sacrifices that you've taken and what you're willing to take, and that the support that they're going to give you, because it's very easy to crash and burn, right? It's very easy to do it in our world, right? And if you don't have your partner as your rock, right? As your supporting foundation, the person that's helping you deal with stress instead of adding more stress to your world, I think that makes it a lot harder. The other thing too is just setting expectations as to, you know, what you want to do, and making sure that with what, not just your partner and you know, your wife or your husband and anything like that, but set expectations to your business partners as well, right? What's everyone's role, right? And I think that transparency at the end of the day is the best policy. Honesty is the best policy. And I think, you know, talking to, and something that I'm constantly working on, I'm not good at talking and feeling and telling people that I need help. I find that one of the most selfish things that I've done in the past was never asking for help, until I realized that asking for help is the ultimate form of charity and giving. Because when you ask for help, you're giving the other person the gift to help you. I mean,
Yes.
think about
love
that.
it.
Yeah. When you ask for help, okay, and sorry, when somebody asks you for help and you go ahead and help them, how do you feel? When you're the one who helps them, you feel great, right? And one of the things that I just, you know, we think about it in a different way. We think about it as, I don't want to inconvenience someone. I don't want to get them to make, you know, to put more effort into something or to go out of their way. But I completely looked at it backwards. By me not asking for help, right, I would literally rob that individual of the feeling that they would get when they help someone else. Right. And sometimes, you know, you become in a world where all you're doing is helping. You're helping others, but you become selfish of not helping others help you. Right. So, I mean, my advice to go back to partnerships, it's and I could talk for a whole day about partnerships, whether it's at home or in business. It's not easy. It's not easy at all, because at the same time, it's a very dynamic situation. You know what I mean? Every partnership is different. There are partners, you know, that have, you know, that are going through, you know, mental issues, or problems going through physical issues, emotional issues. There's so many variables. And I think the best way to conquer or to deal with these scenarios is to be honest and transparent with not only yourself, but with the others around you. Talk about what you're going through, talk about your feelings, ask for help when you need it, because you'd be surprised with the people around you that love you will be more than happy to jump in and help. And more importantly, if people have a true and a genuine purpose of helping you and see you grow and succeed, you need to communicate that to them, because you only will reciprocate that. And by doing so, I think that's the best way to grow, and that's the best way to continue to grow and nourish the relationships. Because I find that partnerships that struggle, whether at home or in business, they struggle because they're not communicating with each other. They struggle because there's no transparency, there's no trust, and all these things need to be developed just to make sure that things will outlast, you know, the next, you know, decade or two. Hopefully it will be lifetime relationships.
And Hesham, there's no one that can better exemplify this than you. Like, you've created this network amongst the people that you work with, your staff, but also your partners. And that's one thing I've always just so admired about you, is you always want to make the people around you better, and including me, man. And we're not even, like, you live across the country from me, and yet you make the time to always text me and just ask me how I'm doing, how you can help me when I don't even ask for it. And I really appreciate that, man. Like, I really do. And you're still the only guy that actually gives out your cell phone number when you lecture.
But I still get no texts. Seriously, dude. I always give up my cell phone number. Nobody texts me.
Everyone thinks it's going to some bot
everybody
or
thinks
something.
that. Everyone thinks I got like an executive assistant or something. Yeah.
I know, right?
No, but it's and I reciprocate the same thing, Neki. Thank you for everything that you do, and for inspiring me to be better, and inspiring everybody that you've touched, and in our camp and in the entire industry. And it's definitely an absolute pleasure to have you, and obviously Akil as well, in the industry, and to have you two as personal friends.
Yeah, man, it's wicked, dude. Thank you so much for coming on. You know, I want to bring you back 3 or 4 times, because I want to talk about corporate dentistry. I want to talk about, you know, how do you run your office, but we didn't get into that. I just bromanced with you too hard, man. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, hey, you know what? With artificial intelligence right now, the solutions might be might be changing very quickly. Who
Yeah.
knows? Yeah.
Chat GPT, right?
Chat
That's all we need.
GPT.
We'll
I'm
get
That's
gonna
you
write
all
to
we
some
say
need.
websites
whatever you
tonight.
want.
Yeah, exactly. But no, thank you so much, Neki, and I'm always more than happy to jump on again. Thank you for having me, and yeah, have a wonderful evening.
You too, man. We'll talk to you
Thank you.
soon. See you,
Thank
everybody.
you. See you
Yeah,
guys.
thanks.
Bye bye.
Yeah. Kill, what'd you think of that episode, man?
Dude, well, I think there was a lot left that we didn't actually get to cover, which we told him after, and he was like, "Yeah, let's just like do a 3-hour episode together." So,
Yeah, the thing I like about him is he's such a wealth of knowledge, and whenever I'm unsure about like a business question, he's always my first phone call. And I wish that, I hope that we all have that connection with a person just like Hesham to ask these questions too, because I know I just have one practice. He has 30, and he's been through the same problems I have before. And he's just so smart. I find he's just like a visionary in our profession.
yeah, and an excellent communicator. Like sometimes
Oh, totally.
I'm sure, like, sometimes when we have guests on and we're just like, oh, like we got to jump in and, like we're trying to keep the conversation moving. We probably asked all of like 8 questions an entire
Oh,
episode,
totally.
and he
Yeah,
just ran with it, which was awesome.
totally. Man, I want to bring him back to talk about um corporate dentistry, to talk about its place in our profession. And really, if either on either side, if you're a new grad who's going to associate in a corporate practice, or if you're an experienced dentist who's going to sell their practice to a corporate dental outfit, or like a DSO, I think he has all this knowledge, and we're all wondering about it. I think we just need to have that episode with him, man.
Oh, 100%. Like at, my night job, and I won't call it my day job. Right now it's my night job. My day job is dental school, but like my night job at Sage, like whenever we talk to, because like we're in the practice of selling businesses, whenever we talk to a corporate or someone and say, hey, have you ever considered this? Or we have clients and we're saying, have you ever considered a DSO versus like an individual independent buyer? Like there's so much misinformation about what the DSOs
Yeah.
are. And it's just like, the branding doesn't quite help, right? Like dental corp. It's not like, it's not the most endearing term, but there's just so much misinformation out there, regarding just what it means to the practicing dentist if they sell to a DSO.
Yeah. And
like it'd be
and
great to see.
we just don't know. That's the thing. Like, as a practicing dentist, I hear what my friends tell me, and a lot of what my friends tell me is their own opinions, and I don't even know what's real and what's fake anymore, man. So it'd be nice to get like the real scoop at the end of the day, because the people that are, the corps that want to buy your office, they just tell you it's sunshine and roses, right? And then the people that have been in it for a couple of years tell you something different, or they may agree. I don't even know anymore. I don't know what's real and fake. So I think it'd be just like real honest information, dentist to dentist, I think would be, so beneficial.
Yeah, it's like the Google reviews business, right? Like no one ever leaves a positive Google review. You only
Isn't
hear
that
about the
true?
people complaining that, they got food poisoning from the tempura.
Yeah. That's so true, man. But man, Hesham also taught me, especially during COVID, he was like, Neki, you got to look at your numbers. I'm like, man, I do look at my numbers. He's like, no, man, you need to like understand. Like that's when he was doing his MBA and stuff, and he was teaching me how to really look through an income statement, how to really understand my balance sheet. And being a dentist, man, you're in dental school, those words don't even show up in dental school. So I don't know, man. I feel like there should be an entire like semester long class on financial management of a dental office. And I think Hesham's going to teach that to us in an hour.
I think it should be done like every single year for all your 4 years. Like you should just like rinse and repeat, because this should be your bread and butter by the time you're done, right? You should know exactly what you're making, exactly what you're spending, and exactly what you're taking home. Like those should be like the easiest things, but no one knows those numbers.
Yeah. And what you take home should not be reinvested into a crappy restaurant.
Yeah.
Because I did that.
Have you been there?
Shut up, man. For another episode.
But I wanted to ask him like this very simple question, which is, I get a lot of flack for this all the time because people are like, you're the business guy. You're not a clinician. And I wonder if he ever gets that same, hate. And it's like, you own like 30 practices. You're not a clinician. And like at
Oh,
the
he
dental school
does.
conference, yeah. But isn't
Yeah.
that like, why do those things have to be mutually exclusive?
Totally. But dude, he's the guy that makes it like he's not. It's not as if he's just dabbling into it. The guy works 60 hours a week as a clinician. 60. Last time I talked to him, he was in Florida going to like Pico's training on lateral sinus lifts. In the summer, he's heading off to Europe to learn, more bone grafting. Or I think he's going to Urban's course in Istanbul. It's not in Romania. I have no idea. See, that's how shitty of a clinician I am. I don't even know where these courses are, man. But he has the ability, and I think he's kind of showing us the way of like, you can be a phenomenal clinician and run the business side of it too. So he's one of my idols, man. Like I absolutely just love that guy, and I can't wait to have him on again.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, what's interesting is it's almost like a double standard, right? It's like if you are a solid clinician, like has anyone ever, because you're an insanely good clinician, everyone knows that, right? Like people know that you're the third molars guy, you're like the guy for extractions. Like, does anyone ever tell you, oh, but you must not be a good business person?
I think I tell everyone I'm not a good business person, man. But
But genuinely,
no, like I think for me, the way I learn is through my own mistakes. And like you were asking Hesham about failures, and like I just don't see the failures because I make the mistake, and sometimes they're bad mistakes, and sometimes it's a tough pill to swallow at how much you lose, but it's just the best learning lessons out there. And whether it's clinician or clinical dentistry or financial management or mismanagement of your practice, I think making those mistakes are the most important part. And I think, I don't think people give me too much flack for being a bad business person, but I'm always willing to help out and give, new grads my advice on how not to make those mistakes. Cause like Hesham said, like when you're a brand new grad, you shouldn't really just go out and buy a practice. And I did. And I spent $2 million on a practice that was, I didn't know how to run.
and it came
And
flooded.
totally right. And it came flooded. And just like Dr. Sanya said, or Dr. Aurora, she's like, it's hard to manage dentistry or hard to provide dentistry when you're a new grad because you charge the same amount as the 30-year veteran dentist down the street that knows everything how they're doing because the fee guy's the same. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's the part, as soon as she said that, that really made so much sense to me because new grads, I don't think should jump into the world of the business of dentistry right off the bat. Like learn your skills, learn your craft, learn why, you want to own practices. What if you hate that type of dentistry? Exactly what Hesham was saying. You can't, if you open up a practice in a heavily pedo area and you hate working on kids, how do you know that until you've gotten your hands wet for a year, right?
100%. I'll tell you an interesting thing that I discovered this weekend. So I'm getting a cavity filled, right? Like I know, give me the shit now for not flossing, but I'm getting a cavity filled, and I go to this new dentist that, like long story short, I needed an emergency procedure done because I had to get a lingual wire put on. It's not important, not really
Yeah.
interesting, but I went to this new clinic that you and I were texting about
Yeah.
over the weekend, and it was the single most beautiful dental clinic I have ever seen in my entire life. And we're
Really?
gonna have him on the podcast. I talked to him about it, and you know what the interesting thing he said was? He said, I was like, because I thought of what she said about, you know, you get paid pretty much the same, right? It's like, how do you compete? And I thought of it from the inverse perspective. Like he has all this overhead, but he's just really getting paid as much as the guy who has like the plastic barriers up, right?
Totally.
So I asked him, I'm like, why do any of this, right? Like marble floors, massive TVs everywhere. Like the Aesop soap, like the really
Yeah.
expensive soap that they have in like all like the celebrities' houses. Like he had those in the like operatories with like marble sinks, insane. And I was like, why do this? Because you're getting paid as much as just anyone else. And he goes, you know what? I've worked hard enough my entire career to know that I want to come to work to a place that I'm proud of and I enjoy spending time in.
Totally.
And I was like, that was a perspective I never considered before.
Yeah.
Like, do you and your staff like coming there every single day?
Yeah. That it's totally genius. And honestly, that's exactly why I put like 90s rap quotes on my wall,
I actually
because
mentioned you.
I love that shit, man. And like,
Yeah.
I broke it. I just hired those people that put vinyl on your wall. I'm
Yep.
getting started from the bottom. Now we're here. Part it put on like 6 feet on like on the top of one of my walls. So when I look up, and my favorite op, well, have our favorite ops, right? You look up, start from the bottom over here, and I'm gonna have a little owl there. But it
That's
just
awesome.
I totally hear that though. Like I resonate with that. It's, you don't do it for the patient, you do it for you. Because if you're gonna spend more time in that office than you own your house. So why not make it awesome? I love that mentality, man. And I can't wait to have him on the podcast. I want to pick his brain because he's a smart dude.
Yeah. Let's not spoil too much for the next episode, but this is just a teaser. This is just a teaser for
Yeah.
the next one.
Yeah, man. But we'll have Hesham on again. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you guys next week.